want to start the class by welcoming all of you. There's so many of you. And thank you so much for coming today. My name is Terry Boffman. I've been in banking for 38 years. I'm a senior vice president with the Bank of San Juans. And my role with the bank is I manage all of our business customers in El Paso County, Pueblo County, and Fremont County. So those customers that are looking to do, ACH direct deposit payroll. We worked with, NOAA setting up accounts here for the chamber. But, we go out and we're on site working with those companies in our area. And I love what I do. I just, the company is really good to me. And I love going out and meeting new businesses and helping them grow their business and making things more efficient for them as well. Stacy, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Oh, sure. I'm Stacy Harner, and I'm a branch manager 3. So I've kind of taken on a new role where I'm overseeing Pueblo County, all of the Pueblo County branches. So instead of actually managing a branch, I'm kind of managing the managers of the branch. So it's been a new role, but it's been exciting. So and I work hand in hand with Terry, and I try to follow her around everywhere we go, learning and having her push me beyond my limits.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, we'll go ahead and get started today. We're going to talk about financial products and services and a little bit about the differences between banks and credit unions. I always say that, the difference between banks and credit unions, they're all about the same thing, taking deposits, cashing checks, taking care of customers. And so when we look at the differences between them, whether you bank with a bank or a credit union, as long as you have somewhere that you're engaged with and utilizing financial services, that's always just a good plan, and we feel comfortable with that as well. So as we look at page 5 and we talk about deposit insurance, and oh my gosh, right now our world in the banking industry has just changed. Interest rates started to increase. So that made people want, higher interest rates, and we haven't had to look at that for, I would bet, 20 years. And now all of a sudden, we've got people that are really intent on higher interest rates. Then the next thing that happened is we had a couple of banks that failed. That again changed our world, because then we started seeing people very concerned about their deposits. And so FDIC insurance is very much there to protect the banking industry and those customers. So FDIC insurance insures, depending on ownership of those accounts, and I won't bore you with all those logistics, but up to $250,000. So I always just encourage customers, and we have lots of customers calling us right now that have higher balances than that, so that we can help them kind of spread that out and make sure that they're insured. Bank of the San Juans is a division of Glacier Bank Corp. We're a $21 billion bank out of Montana. And so we're a very secure bank. And, when customers are asking about that, I email them lots of data to support, how we operate and how secure we are. So when customers are asking about that stuff, just making sure, and credit unions have their own type of insurance as well. So I think people just need to make sure that they feel comfortable with that coverage. Next, on page 6, we're going to just briefly talk about deposit products. So savings account, savings are really used to set up money for future. So just, saving those funds. Checking accounts are very much transactional accounts. So you can have a debit card tied to your transactional account, your checking account, or write checks. And we see less and less checks these days in the environment. And the thing that's really challenging in my job right now is we are seeing tons of fraud on the deposit side with large business customers. So I always say the bad guy is always a step ahead of us, and he's always out there just, doing things that are, very concerning to banks and businesses out there. So a lot of challenges going on. Certificates of deposits, those can be from a term of 3 months on up to 5 years usually. So these are dollars, again, that you kind of set aside. And it again is kind of a savings account on steroids, where you're putting that money and making a promise to the bank to say, hey, I'm going to leave this. I promise to leave this with you for a year, and we're going to pay you this rate on those dollars. So certificates of deposits usually pay a higher yield on those dollars. So very much a product that you can use to save money. Money market accounts, kind of the same concept. It's kind of a checking account hybrid savings account. And so money markets are designed that you have limits on how many transactions you can process on those, and they pay a higher rate as well, and usually require a higher balance on the money market accounts. So that's just a quick overview of those type of products. Next, we talk a little bit about the lending side, credit cards, lines of credits, installment loans, mortgage loans, and most banks all deal with those same kind of things. And so we have those very same products in our industry as well. Some of the products and services that are outside of that are check cashing places. And so we really try to encourage those people that are using check cashing services to try to get a checking account, because those are very, very expensive processes for persons who don't have checking accounts. Money orders, prepaid cards, debit cards, cashier's checks, some of the additional products and services that a bank would offer to customers as well. On page 7, ATM cards, ATM machines, online and mobile. Do any of you currently use mobile banking at all? Good, absolutely. What I find, of course, I'm an older demographic, and so, many of our younger generation very much are all about the mobile, taking a picture of their check and their deposits. I remember back in the day, I've been in banking 38 years, so I remember back in the day that you banked either close to where you lived or you banked close to where you worked, because you needed that access to that bank, right? These days, nobody needs that. Mobile banking, ATM cards, all of that has changed the environment for banking. And you no longer have to be located close. Direct deposit. Way back in the day, I started when I was in banking, we didn't even have debit cards. That's how old I am and how long that process. There was a time that you didn't have debit cards or direct deposit. And so now that's really changed the banking environment, all that technology. And I think it's super cool. Sometimes, I can be honest, that I have to just stop and wrap my head around that technology to go, what? This does what? But it's really exciting to see that there's, people out using these kind of services and making it so much easier. You don't have to come to a bank anymore. So we love that happens as well. I guess those are, person-to-person payments. So if you have online banking with your current financial institution, that's where you can make payments from person to person. So, you need to pay your spouse or, a relative or something. You can log in, get their routing number and account number, and practically send that overnight into their account. So person to person is a really cool way of making payments to somebody. You go to lunch and I forgot my debit card, so how about I just pay you tomorrow and you'll get that money. So it's really cool process of how that works as well. Next, we'll just jump over to page 8. This kind of talks a little bit about a scenario how this person's going to handle their money. So she has a full-time job and receives a paycheck every 2 weeks. She's had trouble in the past paying her bills on time, and she has credit card debt she wants to pay off. But she also wants to build some emergency savings. She needs a car within the next year and wants to be able to get good credit on that card. So what do you think some of her needs might be, as we talked about some of those products and services just now?
A budget.
A budget? Yes, absolutely. What else?
Some sort of.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because she's got some things that she needs to take care of, right? And maybe a car that she's looking for. What else? Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does sound like she needs to improve her credit. So she's going to have to work on that a little bit as well. So yeah, those are the things. Making sure that she has some cash. She maybe wants to do direct deposit payroll because she, gets a paycheck. So some of those things, and the other thing about direct deposit payroll is you can put part of that into a checking and part of that into a savings. And that way, that's money you don't see. That's money you might not miss. And a good way to save money is by taking part of your paycheck and putting that into some sort of a savings product right from the beginning. Because then what you don't see, you don't miss, right? Where do you think she can get some of these services?
Well, I know.
Right? She can go to bank. Mm-hmm. 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 Right, exactly. one of the things to kind of share with you is she's got some credit issues, and so there are credit card opportunities out there for those that have some challenges with their credit, and they can get a secure card. And what that means is, say for instance, she has $500 in a savings account. The bank can secure that $500. She can't really touch it, but they can secure it and attach it to this credit card. So what that does is she uses her credit card, she pays it off monthly, and within a year, if she continues to do that and handles that very well, then the bank would release that $500 to her, and that helps to increase her credit. So it gives her an opportunity to use her own money to help her build her credit and do a better job with, her credit situation for sure. So let's jump over to page 9. So here's kind of a checkoff list if you're looking for, things for the future: to save money for emergencies, pay my bills in a safe and secure way, send money to family members or friends electronically, get access to cash, borrow money, improve my credit, or build a relationship with a financial institution. So when you're thinking about what your needs are, this is kind of a checklist that you can use for that. And then other financial management needs that you might have. Talks a little bit about maybe some of those products and services that you might need from the bank, and then where can you get those financial services from. So again, we kind of talked about those a little bit, but this is a handy little tool as you're thinking about what you might need from a financial institution. The next one on page 10 is really a great tool, and I really would encourage you to use this if you're ever either A, looking for a financial institution, or B, considering looking for a new financial institution. So what you're going to do on this page is you're going to put down the name of the financial institution and the account type that you're looking for. When you can go online or go directly into a bank, and here's kind of some sample questions that you would ask. Is the bank or credit union insured? And then you would put yes or no. If they said no, which they shouldn't ever, then obviously you wouldn't want to be banking there, because you want to make sure you have that insurance. Is the institution a credit union, and am I eligible to join? Some credit unions, you have to be a member, and usually that's what they're called, is a member. Way back in the day, there used to be teachers credit union. So if you were a teacher, that's how you belong to that credit union. Power Credit Union, Minnequa Works Federal Credit Union. If you worked at the mill, that's how you got to be into those credit unions. They've kind of opened it up now, and it's almost like, well, does your neighbor have a dog? Then okay, you can be our member. It's just very different now, because they really were designed for that exact reason, and now we don't see that happening as much. I don't even know if they really even ask that. If you go into a credit union these days, I think you could just open an account. But they were designed for a specific reason, and that's kind of changed. Do you feel welcome and valued as you go in the institution? I always say, all day long, I can teach somebody to be a teller. All day long, I can teach them to be a teller. Can I teach them really good customer service? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes they are a frontline person, but sometimes they're a backroom person, and they're better on the phones and maybe not the face-to-face. So I'm all about customer service, and I am the first to make sure that as I go into branches, I'm just paying attention to what kind of customer service is happening in there. I grew up with Minnequa Bank way back in the day, and we were all about customer service, and that has never gone away from me. I want to make sure that, we are given the best customer service. So pay attention to those things, because you deserve that for real. Does the institution offer products and services that you might need? So make sure you ask those questions. Are the products and services described in terms and languages I can understand? Sometimes as bankers, we talk in jargon, and I'm always like, oh, that doesn't make any sense to the customer. When somebody logs into online banking, we have what we call a net teller ID. And whenever I hear an employee say that, I'm like, oh, let's have a conversation, because they don't know what that means. Don't ever say that again, because it doesn't mean anything to the customer, right? They're like, I don't know what you just said, because that's not important. But I'm going to get you signed up so that you can get into online banking. So make sure they're not talking jargon. And if they are, ask them what they're really talking about, because you want to understand what they're saying. Is staff available to answer your questions? Can I access my account information, and how do I need to do that? Can I use the phone? Is it paper, online, mobile? Make sure that whatever is important to you to access your account information is available with that financial institution. Can I access my money and how when I need it? ATMs, convenient locations, those kind of things. Are there special accounts for students, older adults, and other groups? What benefits are there for them? So making sure that you ask those questions. Many times, a lot of banks have what we call senior accounts. So anybody over 50 or anybody over 60 can get those accounts and they're free. So lots of questions that you can ask as you're looking at your checking opportunities. On the next page, it's going to kind of go through the scenario of opening deposits and minimum deposits. So making sure that you ask those questions. Sometimes you have to open an account with $100. Some banks require that you keep $100 in that account. So you want to make sure that you're asking those questions so that you don't maybe fall below and then you get a service charge. So asking those questions is important. Will my money earn interest? There's another question to ask. How can I deposit my money? Can I do it at an ATM? Can I do it online? Can I do it with a mobile app? If I plan to deposit checks, how soon will those be available? And that's a good question because sometimes you might have a check that's from out of state. And sometimes as a bank, if you're a brand new account under 30 days, 60 days, 30 days, they may put a hold on those funds because we want to make sure that those are good funds. So making sure that if whatever you're going to deposit is going to have a hold and you might not have it available right away. And really, the bank is trying to protect ourselves, but we're also trying to protect you as well. Is there an online or mobile bill pay? How many of you that have accounts use bill pay? What? Are you kidding me? I am a bill pay promoter all day long, and I'll tell you why. I can go on my computer and within minutes pay all my bills for the month. My husband, though, we have separate accounts. My husband, though, gets out his little checkbook and he's writing a check and putting it in an envelope. And now then he's like, got to find a stamp so he can mail it. And I've been done for hours. I'm like off to the next thing and he's still writing checks for his bills. So bill pay usually is free. And if it's not, I would suggest you find another financial institution because bill pay really should be free. It should be a convenience to you. And there are financial institutions that charge you for bill pay, which is, I think, is annoying. Yes?
Are you talking like, because I have some of my accounts connected to my bank account, but I can't like
So you might have like your utilities that pulls that money out, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So that is an option that you can do with your utilities company, where bill pay is really where I'm going to push payment to them. So I set up that I'm going to pay my car payment. I'm going to pay the utilities myself because I want to see that bill before they take it out, and I'm going to pay it. So I'm just going to set that up. So I might have my credit cards on there, my mortgage loan on there, my car payment on there, all my utilities, anything that I would normally pay in a month, I'm going to set up in my bill pay. And then monthly, I'm going to go in and say, okay, let's send $50 to that. You know, my electric bill is $98.24. I'm going to send that off. And it's very super simple and very, very quick. If in fact, so and this is, I don't want to go into too much detail about this, but if the receiver can take it electronically, then usually it's a 2-day turnaround time. Some of those receiving payment don't have electronic payment options. So bill pay will send them a check. But again, you don't have to write the check. You don't have to get the envelope. You don't have to get the stamp. The system is going to issue a check to that entity to make that payment. So all day long, I'm a bill pay.
Another good feature of bill pay is that you have control of setting those as reoccurring or changing the amounts or not paying it. Where sometimes when you set it up with that other company to pull, you're depending on them to not drop the ball when you want to cancel that. And then sometimes you have to go in and do a stop pay, which is another $30 fee in order to get that money to stop. So bill pay is actually a great feature because you're in control. Mm-hmm. So I kind of, that's just one thing to think about with bill pay too.
So if you have an account, you should go check it out online to see if they have bill pay option and set up a couple of bill pays to test them. Because it's so simple, it's super simple and very easy and convenient. The convenience is huge on those as well. So bill pay, and then can I set up alerts like on low balances? So a lot of times you can set up an alert to say, hey, if my balance falls down below $100, you get an alert, either email or on a text on your phone. And those are great ways to kind of manage your balances as well. What fees might I have to pay monthly? So making sure you're asking those questions. Same thing on savings accounts. So it talks about checking at the top, and then it kind of goes into some similar questions with your savings account. So just make sure that you're paying attention to those things. Even if you have current accounts now, you might be finding out those answers to those questions. So if you have to have minimum balances and if there's any fees for certain things. Debit cards, making sure that if you have a debit card, are there rebates on bonuses or rewards on your debit card? Because some offer rewards on debit cards. Can I set up alerts on my debit card? And I love debit card alerts because every single time you use your debit card, you get an alert on your phone that says, hey, you just paid $6 for coffee at Starbucks. And that way, if I get an alert that says something that I'm like, I didn't just make a purchase, then I know that my card has been compromised and I'm going to have to shut it down with the bank. So alerts for your debit card, you should do that if you're a debit card user. And I'm definitely a debit card user. And then what fees might the card have? Next, it talks about overdrafts and, what does it cost if you bounce a check? Do they pay the check? So these are a lot of questions here, too, that you should be looking for and finding out if they have overdraft programs, what fees, how much is an overdraft, what is that going to cost me, and can they link your savings account to your checking account? So then what happens is if I happen to overdraft, or I know I have like a major expense, say I need tires on my car, and I need to go get the tires, then automatically I know my savings is going to bump over to cover those tires and I don't have to worry about it. So link your savings account to your checking account. Stops overdraft. And then on those emergency times, you don't have to worry about making sure that you have enough money if you have it in the savings to transfer over. So those are great things to link up your savings to your checking account. Next, we're going to just talk a little bit about other services. We just talked about the person-to-person money orders, remittance transfers, safe deposit boxes for those people who need safe deposit boxes to rent, and then third-party access. So third-party access really means, for instance, a lot of the business customers have a business account with us, and then their accountant needs access just to view the account. So we'll give them access, and the signer of that business signs off that yes, it's okay that ABC Accounting has access to my account. So that's kind of what that's talking about as well. And then overall, which financial institution did you choose? You would mark that on there. Next is just kind of talking about opening, checking, and savings. And again, based on those pages where we kind of talked about the questions you might ask, then those would be the things that you would consider when you're opening a checking or a savings. A lot of times a savings account, you're limited to the withdrawals on that account, or you're going to get hit with service charges, so you want to make sure, and minimum balances, so make sure you ask those questions on that as well. Again, there's kind of some checklists in there for opening a checking and savings. So if you're interested, make sure that you kind of use that as a way to verify that. Many times people who have a checking account and say they overdraft a checking account somewhere and they just don't have the money and the fees keep going up, and finally the bank says, hey, we're going to just close this account out because we're not getting our money out of it. So many times those accounts are turned into sort of collection agencies, if you will. And so then when you go to open an account somewhere, that's going to pop up to say, hey, Joe Smith owes $500 to Wells Fargo. We're going to choose not to open that account. So you want to make sure that if you owe another bank, you really should go pay them off before you try to get another account somewhere. Or in our bank situation, we don't do those verifications. So if somebody comes to Bank of San Juans, we don't even verify those. We open accounts and hope that we can keep those accounts in good standing. So just make sure that if you have a situation where you owe another bank, you should probably take care of it anyway. But some banks don't check that, and we don't. And here it talks on page 17. It does kind of talk about that banking history report. So there's check systems, and check systems is the big one that most banks use to verify if that customer owes money to another bank. So just know that as well. Next, if you have a dispute on your account, make sure that you understand that you have so many days from the time that a dispute is on your account to notify your bank. And that way, and like I said earlier, we're seeing so much fraud with business accounts. So anytime a business account has fraud on their account, we're pretty much locking the account up and figuring out a way to how to secure that account and keep that fraud from going through. So make sure that you're balancing your checkbook every time too. Some people don't really balance their checkbooks anymore. They might just automatically, me for the most part, I'll just go into my account and see what my balance is and look at those transactions and I'm good to go. I know that that's my balance and I'm comfortable with that. But if you're not doing it that way, make sure that you review your bank statements and that those items on your bank statements are purchases and debit card transactions that you actually had used. It goes through a little bit about how to dispute those, so there's some information on there. On page 19, there's a sample letter that you could use if you have disputes as well. So if you ever have a dispute, most of the time if you have a dispute with the bank and there's some fraud on your account, we're going to require that you go file a police report. So the police give you a number for that, and then you bring that back to the bank, and then the bank, typically what we'll do is we'll do provisional credit. We'll give credit back on that transaction, and then there'll be some research done to make sure if that was a fraudulent account and if we can recoup our dollars back on that. Occasionally, that doesn't happen. Occasionally, the provisional credit will get pulled because maybe it was a good transaction and you forgot you used your debit card for $700 at somewhere. So occasionally that'll happen, but there's a sample letter in there as well. There's a couple of sample letters. And then it talks a little bit about, on page 21, the options for opening an account despite challenges. So if you have a negative banking history, what you can do if you don't have enough money to keep in the account. Credit building loans, it talks about that. Secured credit cards, we talked a little bit about that a minute ago. And if you're just not sure, do some homework on the financial institution and make sure that, they're in good standing. On the next page, making sure if you don't have a social security number, the bank can open accounts with some different types of identification for those situations. And it kind of talks about that. So just know the general purpose for opening an account, including options if you're initially unable to open an account. So making sure on that part. I know that was a quick overview of those. Do you have any questions on that section at this point? Okay, cool. Stacy's up next, and so she's going to talk about filling out a deposit slip. I can hand those out. How many of you ever filled out a deposit? Oops, I don't have enough. How many ever have filled out a deposit slip? Yep. You? Yeah. Yeah. Mostly everything's direct deposit for you. Is that why? Yeah. Yeah.
I have paper checks that I have to put in like every week.
Oh, there you go. So you fill out a deposit slip. Okay. Oh, okay. So these are some actual checking withdrawal and savings withdrawal slips that the bank uses. And Stacy's going to kind of talk about those, just kind of walk you through those.
Yeah, so on the deposit slip, and you've all raised your hand and you've all filled out a deposit slip, so this ought to be pretty easy to go through. Some takeaways about filling out a deposit slip is you can use a deposit slip to ensure that your money is properly accounted for. It's really important, especially if you have cash when you come in, that you know how much you're going to deposit into the account. It keeps kind of checks and balances on both sides. So the teller is supposed to make sure that they're verifying what you have, and if there's a discrepancy, they should tell you that. So it's really important that you do come in with a total. When you fill out the deposit slip, you'll enter the cash amounts in one area and the check amounts in the other. So and we'll go through this in a minute. You may need a deposit slip if you're using an ATM. Some ATMs do take deposits, some don't. I know for Bank of San Juans, we do not accept ATM deposits, and there's different ways you can do that. Some you can actually fill out a deposit slip to put in there. Others you just put it in an envelope and then the teller works it the next morning. When you make a bank deposit, the entire amount of the deposit may not be available right away. Kind of like what Terry just talked about a minute ago. The bank does have the right to put holds on funds, and there's different scenarios that come into play with that, especially if you're a new account holder. That's usually a 9-day hold for the first 30 days. So filling out a deposit slip, you're going to provide your personal information. Look at this. So it's important to have the date, your name, because the teller needs to match up that it's actually going into your account and not somebody else's. So name is pretty important. Your account number is also very important, but a lot of times people come into the bank and they don't know this account number, so we're happy to look those up for you. Like I said, listing your cash amount on the deposit slip is important because we want to make sure that we're matching what you say. List your checks individually. So the first box at the top is for cash, as you can see, and then it's got a couple spots here where you can list the checks. You can, and this is mostly for your reference, so you can put the check number or who it's from. It doesn't really matter. And then if you run out of room, there's a whole section on the back of the deposit slip that you can list those. And then at the front, it has your subtotal, and then you can also bring in that total from the other side. And then, of course, at the bottom is your total less cash received. So if you want cash back, you're going to put it in that section. And then what is your signature on a deposit slip for? Does anybody know?
In case, like, they have to go back and verify, right?
So that's a good point, yes. But in order to get cash back from a deposit, it is required that you have a signature. We want your signature on there saying that you're asking for that cash back. So the name is important, but the signature is verifying that it's saying that you're getting that cash back. Does that make sense? And then we talked about the deposits to the ATMs, mobile deposits. So we do, a lot of banks do take mobile deposits. That doesn't normally require a deposit slip to go with that, but there's specific instructions when you set up in your online banking for mobile deposits. Most of the time, it's just how you're endorsing the check on the mobile deposits. And there's some other requirements with that as well, as far as like keeping those checks in a secure place on hand for, I believe it's 60 days.
Have any of you ever done a mobile deposit?
I have, and it bounced back, but I never did it again.
Oh, how come? How come it came back?
I think it was just, I don't remember what it was with the check. There was something wrong with the check, but whenever it got bounced back, I had to pay the fees for all that. So I was like, well, I'm not doing this ever again. I've never happened.
Oh,
That was years and
wow.
years ago, whenever it first came about.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah.
And there are, there's limits involved with mobile deposit as well, like limits depending on your account, whether it's personal or business. And they'll definitely, again, for that first 30 days, they're gonna really watch those checks to see if there needs to be a hold. And sometimes it's a little bit delayed. So sometimes if you're close by a bank, sometimes it's easier just to go in and make the deposit because it goes in right away. Where sometimes on that mobile, it sometimes takes a little bit longer. So, and funds availability. Does anybody have any questions on funds availability when you're depositing money into the bank? Cash is of course immediate, but the bank does, reserve the right in order to put holds on those funds. And normally large deposits, the first 5,500 I believe is available, and then the rest can be held up to 7 days. So most tellers are going to be looking for that pretty much every deposit, unless you're, familiar customer that we're both really comfortable with. Because like Terry said, there is a ton of fraud anymore. So,
And we get a lot of people who, get these checks in the mail, or somebody's sending them, hey, I'm going to buy your fifth wheel or whatever. But I wrote it out for a little bit more. Go ahead and deposit it and then you can pay me back. We are not trying to be snooping when people come in, but we are asking way more questions than we used to when it's a large check. And if they tell us that they got it from somebody they don't know, we're going to have serious conversation with them because we're trying to protect them. And there's times that, those will slip through and it's on them if that check gets returned. And sometimes it's large dollar amounts. And now they've sent those funds maybe somewhere else and now they're out. And there's nothing we can do about it at that point. So be really careful about, there's so many scams going on. It's just crazy.
yeah, if you get free money in the mail, it's probably, you're
Chances
probably
are.
telling yourself that it's probably too good to be true, and it probably is. So that's usually a good rule of thumb. But these scams, like Terry said, they do get pretty elaborate. It's amazing some of the things that we've seen in the banking world with the stories that we've been told. So unfortunately, being a teller sometimes isn't always as easy as it used to be, because you have to question every single customer anymore that comes into the bank, just because you're wanting to protect them as well as protect the bank. So, but yeah, some of the fraud and the scams that we're seeing are pretty amazing, actually. So, What about the routing number? Does everybody know what the routing number is, where to find the routing number, what the routing number does? So routing number is going to always be on the bottom of your deposit slip and your checks. And that's kind of just the verification of which bank you're using. So when this goes through Fed, it kind of names out the bank in a sense, I guess. So the routing number is pretty important.
So even if you set up direct deposit,
Mhm.
it's going to require a routing number and account number so that that direct deposit knows where to send it to. So
knows which bank to go to based off the routing number, and then it knows which account number to put it in based off the account
And the
number.
routing numbers they do vary based on the region that you're in, is that correct? It's not just that if you have like a US bank, for example, you can't use the same routing number from a New York bank here in Colorado.
Yeah, and some
Right.
of the bigger banks like US Bank, Wells Fargo, they might have multiple routing numbers.
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
very true, yes. So you want to make sure you're checking with that institution to make sure you have the right one. And some institutions have different routing numbers based on maybe ACHs. They might have an ACH routing number. They might have a wire routing number. So if you need to send a wire or something, you need to check with the bank and make sure that you are sending it to the right routing number, because those can differ as well. Yeah, that's a good question.
Great question.
Yep. Any other questions on routing numbers? Hey, any questions on filling out a deposit slip? Does everybody feel pretty comfortable with that? And I know we just went under some changes at Bank of the San Juan and have an upgraded system where you actually don't have to have a deposit slip to deposit a check unless you have cash. The cash has to be, kind of more monitored, and we have to have a checkoff system to show that that's coming in or out. But if you're just depositing a check, you can walk in the bank now and the tellers don't even have to have a deposit slip. So kind of some new ways of technology, I guess. Gotta love technology. All right, writing a check. I do have some checks. Does anybody write checks anymore?
Oh,
Noah does.
Noah. Okay. Oh, look, there's some head bobbing in there. Did we give them papers on that?
I think I forgot to even.
We have to withdraw form and
Okay,
Oh, how to write a check? You didn't get that? Okay.
there's 4 of those, and I didn't do the bank statement, but I'll just hold it up.
Mm-hmm. So these checks are not good anywhere, just so you know, but they are really live checks. So nice try. I know how excited you were to go, hey, blank
I
checks,
forgot to
what?
make copies of these. Would you mind just running me 4 of each, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of each?
Oh, has it been a long time? Yeah.
Thanks.
well, I usually, like I said, I deposit like a lot of my money in cash in person.
Sure. Yeah.
Deposit checks, but I don't ever have to return them.
Right. Yeah.
Because I usually if I need to give money to somebody,
Then you give them cash. Yeah.
So like money orders,
Mhm.
if they need to be like in person.
Yeah. Well, and remember that writing a check to somebody is your proof that you paid them. If you give them cash and they come back later and go, you didn't pay me, writing a check is proof that you paid them. So
It's actually,
I
yeah,
think sometimes
it's
it's nice to be able to do everything in cash, but man, if you have to have proof later that you paid that, you don't have the check.
So we'll just, we can go ahead and start. Number 1 on how to write a check is your date. And who can tell me why the date on a check is important?
You better make sure the money's available on that day.
Well,
Good.
that's a good point.
So talk about
So
still dated, or
yeah, so
if they write it before. So like if I write a check today but date it for next week, can it be cashed today?
No. Until the date that it's posted.
That is true, a true statement, but I promise you that if you come in with a check or you send a check to somebody, it's going to go through the system and nobody's going to pay attention to that date.
no, teller
So
might
just
catch
know
it.
that
Yeah.
if I tell somebody you can't cash this till next week, and you think that because I date it for next week they can't cash it, most likely it's going to go through. Because seriously, there's so many checks in the system. We're not really looking at that. We're
Tellers,
looking more at signatures.
yeah, signatures are important. Tellers they're supposed to be trained on looking at the dates, but with the amount of fraud and stuff that we see, I can guarantee you that that's probably not going to be top of mind. I mean, they should be checking those dates. But Terry's right. If you write a check a week out, there's probably not enough checks and balances to prevent that check from coming through. I mean, especially if they deposited into their account at another financial institution, it's not gonna be checked. Now, if they come to the teller station, they are supposed to tell them that they can't cash that check till that date. And then the other side of a date on a check is they become stale dated. So after 6 months, if this is older than 6 months, then it'll get sent back, because basically a check is no good after 6 months of it being written.
Now again, just like we said, nobody's really checking those dates. So sometimes that'll happen and sometimes it won't.
Yeah.
If it's a really large check, a dollar amount, it's probably going to get verified and returned. But a $10 check that's still dated, most likely it's going to go through.
And I've actually seen them come back
Mhm.
for that
Oh,
amount.
Yeah.
So
you
there
never know.
might be more checks and balances than we know on that, but like Terry said, chances are it's probably going to run through the system. So the pay to the order of is, what is that line for? What do we write on there? Who you're paying. Yeah. So business or a person, that's what you're going to put on that line. Step 3, writing the payment amount in numbers. So there's a little box on the right-hand top corner, usually right over here, and that's the numeric amount. You're going to write the numeric amount. The numeric amount should, or the written amount, should match the numeric amount that is on the line below the payee. And does anybody know the importance of the numeric written out amount on a check? So actually in the banking world, the written out amount is what we call the legal line. And that's really what banks are supposed to be going off of. So if it's written different here than it is the written out amount, we're actually going to take the written out amount because that's our legal line. So it's really important that we're writing that out correctly and that it's matching. Because as a teller on the teller line, if this amount is less or more, then I'll let the customer know this is $500 less, so technically I have to take it for that amount. So you might want to take this back to the customer and let them know that, they're going to have to rewrite the check for you. So
And the other thing is making sure that you write your check as far to the left as you can. Because if you leave space, what if somebody writes in $1,000 in front of that and puts a little 1 on the numeric line? So make sure that you have it as close to the left-hand side as you can, because you don't want somebody to alter that check.
Yeah, that's very important. So let's go to the next page. We just talked about the payment amount in words and how important that is. The memo line is kind of just whatever you're writing a check for. I honestly don't use the memo line. I won't lie. But I mean, if you're maybe paying half of the loan or something, you can put on there what that's for. Christmas, I'm buying Christmas presents. I'm paying my, whatever you're paying that person for, that's what the memo line is, so that you can, I guess, refresh your memory later as to why you wrote that check. And the signature on the check, this is also very important. If it's not signed, it shouldn't be cashed. But again, like Terry said, sometimes there's no checks and balances with as many checks that go through the bank, so sometimes they can. However, if a teller catches that, they're not going to cash that check. The other thing that's important about the signature is the tellers are going to be checking to make sure the signature matches the signature card. So it's important that when you sign your checks, that you sign them like you signed them on your signature card. If not, we'll be giving you a call saying, we want to make sure that you actually did sign this check. So signature is really important.
I know that in banking, many times, I've had customers who will just do like a squiggly line or just a squiggly line across. And I always tell them, do not do that. Can somebody copy that? Absolutely. Most likely they can. Can they copy my whole signature? Most likely they cannot. So people who just use a squiggly line, I always encourage them to write it out the right way, because somebody could forge that squiggly line.
Probably easier than you think on those, huh? All right, balancing a checkbook. Do you guys balance your checkbook each month? Do you guys just look online and make sure?
They're like, look, there's one in the class that balances, yay.
Do you guys know how to balance a checkbook?
Write the amount and then the amount that you're
Well, that's to keep your register.
Yes. Yeah, so let's start there. How many of you keep a register?
Oh, look, good. Okay.
So at the end of the month, when you get your bank statement, you pass those out for me, Noah?
Oh, I did.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's going to look something like this. This is just kind of a fake one, but it's going to tell you your credits and your debits and your balances. It's also going to tell you the account type, your closing balance, total debits that came through, total credits that came through, and what your opening balance was at the beginning of that statement. So these usually are about 30 days long. But it's important to take your check register. And I know a lot of bank statements now don't come with a bank reconciliation worksheet, but you can find these online. So you're going to take your bank statement balance. You're going to also go through your register, and you want to mark off the ones that have cleared. So if you have any deposits that haven't cleared, there's going to be a box on your reconciliation page where you're going to list those and then get a total. If there are checks that haven't cleared, there's going to be a box on your reconciliation where you can list those checks and the amount, the check numbers, and then get a total. And then you can put all of those in your amounts towards the bottom, where you're going to go with your check register balance, any adjustments, which would be your credits and your debits. And then hopefully when you add or subtract all of that, you come up with the same balance that you have in your check register. If not, then you have a problem and you're going to have to go back through and try to figure out which check you forgot to write down. Which is where mobile banking comes in good, because now you can just pull up your online banking and try to go through that. So does that all make sense? Yes, Noah?
Yeah, sometimes for a couple months, anything may not always be the full month. Off a day or two.
Yes.
What are the reasons for that?
Some of it, sometimes it's a holiday, sometimes it's a weekend. Most, I mean, and we can change those if you need them changed to a different date. But a majority of the business accounts, I believe, usually are the 31st of the month. So if you have a month that doesn't have that 31st day, it's going to bump it up, to that day. Holidays, and then of course, that's another good thing about the online banking is if you have the e-statements, you get those a lot sooner than you would waiting for them to come in the mail. So we'll sell online banking every day.
Yeah. How many of you get electronic statements? Good job. It's so much better.
Safer,
Yes. Yes.
much safer. So any other questions on bank reconciliation with your statements? Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Terry.
Perfect. All right. How many of you know what your credit score is? Oh.
Range, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you check your credit score? Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a credit
Oh, Credit Karma. Yeah, I love Credit Karma because every month you get an update. I love it. So yeah. And if you're not doing that, you need to do that. Because when we talk about fraud, people get a hold of my social security number has been compromised with the IRS. So I cannot file electronically because of that. I have to always file my taxes with paper, send it in because of that. The silly thing is, I'm like, why can't we just correct this? But they said because my social security number has been compromised, somebody else filed their taxes using my social security number. So now I always have to file, and it cannot go electronic. So it is really important to make sure that you stay on top of your credit score, not only to make sure that how your credit's doing, but to make sure that somebody isn't out there, compromising your credit. So my credit has never been compromised, luckily, but my social security number has. So it's important to stay on top of that stuff for sure. So we're going to talk about credit scores and a little bit of information about that. I know that Noah has I think there's some additional classes that are coming up in the future that's going to talk more in depth maybe about that. So we're just going to kind of talk about the general idea on credit and what that's about. If you go to page 12, I love this little graph because it's actually, and my colors, it kind of went all together, but you'll see the data on there. But it talks about your credit score and what affects your credit score. So 10% is new credit, 35% is your payment history, 10% is a credit mix, 15% is the length of the credit history that you have, and then 30% is the amount that you owe. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into the calculation for your credit score. So I'm just going to give you some ideas on if you use credit, the general rule of thumb is that you pay it off every month. It's good to use credit because then it shows that I have credit and I use it and then I pay it right back off. But here's the catch on that. If I go to apply for a new car and I've got 3 credit cards out here that have $5,000 on them. Now I'm not using them, so I think that's good, right? But it might not be that good because your lender is going to say, She has available $15,000 that she could go out and spend today, right? Can she still afford this car if she were to use this? So what I suggest is this. If you have outstanding credit cards that you're not using, don't close them because you want to keep that credit history, right? Because that's part of your credit report is your credit history. You don't want to close it. But ask them to lower those so that you don't have that much available. So just these are things to think about when you're looking at improving your credit history. Use it, pay it off. I always say use your credit cards for things you need, not things you want. And I always talk to high school students about that. And we have a real detailed conversation about using credit and how to use credit wisely. But if I talked a minute ago about needing new tires on your car. Is that a need? Yeah, I'm going to have to get new tires. So I'll use my credit card probably for that. But then I'm going to try to pay that off in the next 3 months if I can, right? So that I can take that right back down. So I always say this, keep your longest history of credit cards open. If you have 5 cards, do we really need 5 cards? Probably not. Let's close those older ones out and have them paid off and maybe keep 2 or 3. And here's the reasons why you should keep credit cards. If you go out of the country, your debit card might not work. And then what's going to happen? You're going to be in big trouble, right? Say you go out of town or out of state and some big thing happens with your car and the engine dies. I don't know enough about cars, but I'm going to say some big thing happens and you're going to need $10,000 to get back home with that car, right? Are you going to have it in your checking account? Maybe not. So you might need to use that credit card. So use your credit wisely. Use it for things you need and not things that you want. And make sure that you pay it off every month. The other really cool thing about credit cards these days is you get rewards points. How many of you have cards that have rewards points on them? It's amazing the cash back you can get on those. I seriously use my credit card to get my gas. And that way I get rewards points back on that and I pay it off every month. And it just is helping, to kind of offset some of that. And it helps my credit because like I said, you pay it back off at the end of the month. So really pay attention to that kind of stuff with your credit. It's really important that if you're trying to build your credit, look at, do I have some cards I can close? Can I lower some of my limits? Am I paying it off like I should? And am I really using it for things that I need and not things that I want? So really stay focused on that kind of stuff. We're going to next talk about, let's look at page 13. There's a little scenario that you can kind of go through just to see, what Alex is doing with their credit card. So you can, fill that out. That's page 13, 14, 15. Those little things are in there. And then if we go to page 17, though, I think this is the page that's really important when we talk about credit scores, too. Anything from 800 to 850 is an exceptional credit. Exceptional. And I can tell you, in 38 years of banking, I've probably seen 2 of those. I'm not even kidding you. I've probably seen 2. And honestly, for the most part, I would say that most of the time, I see credit scores between the 670 and the 739 in the good. Occasionally, you'll see very good that are over the 740, but honestly, not very often. And then fair is 580 to 669, and poor is the 300 below, the 300 to the 579. And here's the thing about credit scores. When you apply, say you go out to buy a car, and they're going to pull your credit, right? And the first thing they're going to look at is your credit score and your credit history. And they're going to determine your rate on that credit score. So it's really important to pay attention. Do Credit Karma so you can look at it every month and see what's going on with your credit. And a lot of times even on Credit Karma, the thing I like about Credit Karma is it gives you some scenarios or ideas of how to improve your credit. And so if you pay attention to those things, I think Credit Karma is really a good one. You are allowed to get 1 free credit report a year. So I would encourage you to get a full credit report every single year and look at that credit and make sure that everything on there is really your stuff. If it's not, you can do disputes with those credit bureaus. Did you know there's 3 different credit bureaus? Okay. There's 3 different credit bureaus. For the most part, most of the time, your credit scores are going to be very close on all three of those. Credit Karma does the 3 credit scores, so you'll see them. But it's important to make sure that you're looking at it. Oh, I think it has 2, doesn't
So
it?
it has TransUnion and it pays.
That's right. It doesn't have,
What is the difference?
their scoring is just a little bit different. That's all. It's not anything big or huge, but their criteria is just a little bit different on how they score, and that's why there's going to be a little bit of difference between those credit scores when you look at them. But just make sure that you really pay attention to your credit score, because anytime you apply for credit, if you're applying for a house, and that's a big expense, then they're going to be looking at your credit score. Make sure that you really pay attention to that. Yes.
Is it true that when you do go to the car dealer and apply for and they do check your credit,
Mhm.
that it does deem your credit?
Yeah.
score?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So there's a difference between a hard inquiry and a soft inquiry. That is an excellent question. I'm glad you brought that up. So a hard inquiry is when I actually am applying for something that's credit, a car, a credit card. Um, those are hard inquiries where I've actually signed off on it, right? A soft inquiry, though, which doesn't exactly ding your credit, but could be your insurance company. It could be maybe you're trying to apply for a rental property. So they're not gonna get any credit history like the car dealer is. The car dealer is gonna get your full on credit report and see your full on credit. But if I'm applying for insurance, they just want to see if I'm worthy, right? They want to make sure I'm going to pay this bill on time. So they're going to do what we call a soft inquiry. So they have your social security number, and they go into their system, and all their system is going to say is, hey, this person has a 750 credit score. That's all they're going to see. They're not going to see any more than that. It's going to show on your credit bureau in the history that they've looked at, or but it doesn't affect your credit score, because that entity didn't get full credit report, right? Just those that you're actually applying for credit from. So very good question, because there's a difference between those, and you should again pay attention to those, because many times what happens is your insurance company, I always think this is clever that they can do this, but they do it, and I see it on my credit report, is they annually will check your credit report. And I was just thinking, well, that's kind of jacked up. Maybe I had a bad year, and what are they going to do? Increase my insurance? They might. I don't know. I don't really know what's going to happen. But I see it on my credit report. And I remember when I saw that one time, I called my insurance company. I said, so I didn't authorize you to do that. Well, our system automatically does that. And so what are you going to do with that information? Are you going to increase my, well, we might have to if in fact your credit score moved that much. I'm like, wow, okay. There you go. So pay attention to that. That's an excellent question. Yes.
So I guess an additional question, because I
Sure.
signed up for like a loan, but I like co-signed with somebody
Oh,
else.
yeah.
So him and I like are both on the loan, and
Mhm.
it's for like our solar.
Uh-huh.
But the solar panels haven't went up yet. So how is that going to impact my credit? Like, is it going to impact it? Is it the whole loan was mine, or is it like half and half? Does that make sense?
Yep. So that is debt that's incurred to you. And if in fact that primary person or your joint person, it doesn't matter, doesn't pay, guess who's responsible? So what the answer to that question is, you're responsible for the full amount.
Mhm.
Each party is, because we don't know if that second person is going to pay or not pay. Even when you co-sign, I remember when I got my first car and I was 16 years old, and legally in the state of Colorado, you have to be 18 in order to apply for credit. So my parents, of course, had to co-sign. And I just remember my dad like being in my face, like, if you don't pay this, they're going to come after me. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about, because it was still new to me. But if you co-sign on a loan and that person defaults, you're responsible for that debt.
So then the whole thing will show up, but it only shows up once like they start billing you. Is that like on your credit?
Well,
It hasn't
so
shown up on like my credit score is like a 730.
okay.
But it hasn't like shown up, and so I'm wondering if it hasn't just because we haven't started paying back yet. Because even like my student loans show up, but I haven't like started paying.
So when we go back to that graph, here's what you're asking me. Until that debt is really showing on your credit bureau, most likely it's not going to affect your credit until that debt actually shows up. So when that company comes out to do the solar, and if in fact you've already done your loan with them or whatever, maybe they haven't reported it to the credit bureau yet, is my guess. And so then once they report it to the credit bureau, then that whole debt is going to be what's going to affect your credit score. Does that make sense? So you may not see it for a while, depending on when they report to the credit bureau.
How
And
long-
here's an interesting thing.
How long ago did you apply?
Well, it's been a process, but we applied for the loan probably around this time last year.
Oh, wow.
But they checked our like collected income because we both like kind of wanted it.
Mhm.
And so we signed up for it, and then it's just been a process of like installation. And so like they installed everything, but like there's like a few like bells and whistles that they haven't, I guess, got underway yet. And so we have them on our house, but they're not like pulling our electricity yet. And so but like the debt itself hasn't shown up, and it's been like a long
That's interesting.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because
And
that's
for me, I've been wanting to like maybe buy investment properties eventually down the line.
Mhm.
And so I guess like since I don't know too much about credit, like I know to keep up with it and stuff, like I just didn't know how that was gonna like impact. I knew
Yeah.
it was going to, but
yes.
it just hasn't yet, and so I'm like, I guess that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
Can he see it on his credit report?
I don't think I'm not sure if he sees it either. I honestly haven't asked him.
Yeah, that's
So,
interesting.
yeah, that's very interesting that it's taken that long, because usually, and not everybody, and here's the other thing, not everybody reports to the credit bureau. It's possible that that solar company, because you do have to pay to report to the credit bureaus, they may not report to the credit bureau either.
So then it just wouldn't impact me at all.
You wouldn't see it at all.
Depending on like
Exactly.
who I'm lending money from.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Well,
And you
I was
could-
asking 'cause I wanted to buy a car eventually.
Yeah.
And so I know
And you can maybe even ask them, I don't see this on my credit bureau. Do you report to the credit bureau?
yeah.
And maybe just ask them that, because they may not. Most do use credit bureau and report to credit bureau. But it could very well be that that company's like, we're not going to pay for that. We're just, because I don't have solar. Do they put liens against your house?
Yes.
Yeah.
So-
well, no, kind of. So it's like its own. It's almost like an additional home. And so you essentially sign up for like just like you would like a mortgage. And so we signed like a 25-year like whatever like payment plan. And so they give you like X amount for like that 25 years, and then like they're paid off in their years essentially.
Mhm.
And then if you decide to sell your house, then whoever moves into the house, whether they get uninstalled or not, then that person would take over that lease.
I think essentially it's kind of like a lien against your house. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because
But
I
that's interesting.
thought
How
that
do-
I understood that if you don't pay your solar, then they have the ability to either take equity or your home, or however that works.
And that could be true, because honestly, I kind of the agent got most of the conversation, like, and so I just in addition, right? Like I'm okay.
Sure.
That'd be
Yeah.
You haven't
Yeah.
made a payment on them yet?
not yet because they haven't been.
They haven't fulfilled their,
Like, yeah, they haven't
yeah.
been like pulling anything for my power, and essentially like once we get the solar, then like our Black Hills bill will be affected, and so like we'll pay less for Black Hills because the solar is like saving electricity. I guess.
Right.
And it's actually, I have solar panels on my house, and it's actually pretty awesome.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's,
But
like, really
we bought the
beneficial.
house and they were paid for, so I didn't have to do that part of it. So
See,
that's
that's nice.
interesting that it's been a year and they haven't, even-
Yeah, it's been, and then like they came the other day, and then they were like, installation, and it was like these wires that weren't connected. So it's just been like that process, but.
Where'd
like
you
I said,
find
it's
these guys?
just-
I'm just kidding.
Check
Check Check Better Business Bureau every single time when you do something like that. But well, and if they recommended it, you would assume
Yeah.
that that's a reputable company, right?
But
Exactly.
I'm like
So-
with Terry on that one. I'd probably ask him if they do report, just so that you know and you're prepared for that.
Yeah, because they might not.
Because if they don't, then that's good. But you don't want it to just show up when you're trying to do something else. And
Yeah, because we had bought a house one time several years ago, and the people that owned the house held the paper. So they never reported to the credit bureau. So anytime we applied for any credit, they would always say, "Don't you have a house payment?" "Yeah, we do." Well, it didn't show because they didn't report to the credit bureau. So I was like, "Oh, they don't report to the credit bureau because they, And it made sense for them to do that because at that time rates were so low. They were charging us 5%, and you couldn't get a 5% loan or, investment really at that time. So it made sense that they held the paper on that house, but they didn't report to the credit bureau. So it never showed on our credit bureau. And people would always, every time you applied for credit, don't you have a house payment? And like, yeah, but it's a third party and they hold the paper and blah, blah, blah. So just know that not everybody reports to credit
And I
bureaus.
guess like my last, I'm sorry, guys, I have questions, but I guess my last question would be like, if, so let's say like they do report to the credit bureau and I have that loan show up like as like debt to income,
Mhm.
if I were to like apply for a like loan for a mortgage because we want to get like I said investment properties eventually,
Mhm.
how does that loan impact like my ability to be able to get?
It impacts it because it's a debt, and that total amount of that debt is what's impacting your credit score and the utilization of, your debt ratio.
Mhm.
So it does impact it. And remember, that kind of debt is a high price debt because you're spreading it for 25 years.
Yeah.
So but it's not unlike doing, home equity line of credit or a second on your house, because those can be, the same kind of thing, but just know it's going to definitely affect your debt ratio. So
Mhm.
just know that's a high dollar amount that's sitting there. And so then when they figure your income and your debt ratio, and I know there's a class that they're going to talk about debt ratios, but the goal is to try to keep yourself like 70%. So you want to try not to use,
Yeah, well, currently I'm at like less than 30,
uh-huh.
but like because I'm not 23 yet. So
Yeah.
that's why I
But
was
once it does, it's gonna hit, and then that's gonna affect your debt ratio. So, but great question. I mean, those are good questions and just things to think about, that not everybody reports to credit bureaus, and then paying attention to your debt ratios on those as well. So yeah. But then you yourself know that, oh, we have this monthly payment. So even though it doesn't show on my credit bureau, what is that gonna affect? How does that affect my debt ratios?
Yeah.
Can we afford this other investment property?
Well, and it's like it's supposed to decrease our
Exactly.
sign on it, so it's like kind of just this one switch for the other.
Sure. Yeah. As far as, but remember though, your utilities don't show on your credit bureau.
Mhm.
So for you, it's a savings. But remember that on your credit bureau, though, there's this hunk of money that's sitting out there as
And that's all they see.
exactly. So now they're going to understand it, because they're going to understand that if you were to apply for whatever loan it is, just like, there's people that have had medical expenses. And so they have these outrageous medical expenses the people can't pay them. It goes to collection, and now it's sitting on their credit bureau, and it's creamed their credit because now they have all this debt. And many times lenders will work with them and figure out, is this a debt that you're going to pay on or you're not going to pay on, or so that they can. We try to be a little understanding with some of that, because that when you get a medical debt and you don't have the money to pay that and it goes to collection, I mean, it's going to take forever to pay those kind of bills off, because they're high dollar depending on what that was. So
Well, and I was under the impression like that when you pay off, regardless of the debt, as you pay off, like it builds your credit too, as long as you have payments. So they take that into account. Or they still do have like student loans and stuff that I haven't had to start paying on them yet.
Mhm.
And
yeah, right. Yeah, don't pay on them yet. Just hold off a minute. Well, and on Credit Karma, the really cool thing that I like about it too is it'll tell you, I can't even remember what it says because it's been a while since I looked at it, but it'll say like, here's my credit cards, and you pay those off on time every time, and it'll show if you didn't, it'll show you the months you didn't pay it on time, if you had late fees and those kind of things. So Credit Karma is excellent because it has so much detail about your credit and where you can make improvements based on these different areas of your credit score. So and it's free service, and even some of your credit cards actually have a very similar service that, when they send you your statement via, email, you can click on it and look at all that detail too. So just always stay on top of your credit. Make sure that there's nothing wacky out there. But great questions. I mean, the joint stuff and co-signing stuff can get scary. So just make sure that, whoever you're co-signing for, that you're comfortable that they're going to make that payment, because maybe they had some challenging credit history that you don't know about, and now you might be stuck with that debt. So
There's some really great tools on the BSJ website, bankofthesanjuans.com. If you go, there's they're called financial foundations, I believe. There's all kinds of stuff on there. Credit is on there, loans is on there, credit cards is on there. There's all kinds of info, even student loans, I believe. And they're just little short spurts, I think, but there's really a lot of good information that is helpful if you ever want to go out there.
and you don't
look
have
at
to be a
those.
customer.
Yeah,
You can go directly to that link on our website and look at those different tools. And I think a lot of banks do that now. The government, if you will, and I appreciate that they do this, they want us to educate the consumer. And so that's why a lot of banks now are required to have that stuff on their websites, because they want the consumer to be educated.
There's some great calculators on there that you can play with that
Oh,
would,
really?
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
But sometimes I people have to
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not putting my phone number in here. Yeah.
I was like, how much would I be able to qualify for? They're like, sign up for your email, and now this dude.
No,
Yeah, we won't
absolutely
we
no.
won't harass you. So those are just free.
Yeah,
for you to
they're
use,
just free
but
services.
There's some
But
really
your
really
own
great
financial
calculators.
institution should have that too. But if you don't see that, gladly go check them out,
I
because
don't
they're
know. Well, I make with Power because I just had that
Mhm.
since I was like 17.
Sure.
So I just never changed.
Yeah,
But thank you guys for that.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
Any other questions that you guys have today? Awesome. Well, guys, thanks so much for listening to us today. We enjoy coming out and sharing that kind of information. So, Noah, thank you for putting this together
Thank
and
you,
giving
Noah.
us this opportunity for sure. Thank you, guys.
Ladies,